Hi everyone. So I'm actually making this video more so to um, not so much in relation to anything that I've actually really uh, done in the past, but more for some form of personal accountability, and especially also to you know um, talk a little bit more about the process in which sometimes we come to certain crossroads juncture in our life when we have to make choices which are not so popular, and when we do so, you might just end up losing some people, or even before that we might already have lost some people in our life. So and these are not things of our own necessary choice or volition, but just because people will judge us, they will uh, think that certain things of us which are not really true. So it's just the nature of things. But I wanted to make this because I thought that that would give me some form of peace, and I also don't really want to name names in the whole thing about fairness and everything. So, and also while things are going on in terms of investigation, so I might have told y'all that in 2016, sometime after I got out of the abusive situationship or relationship, whatever you call it. You can call it a situationship simply because I wasn't even aware of it being just some kind of setup, which I don't want anyway. Okay, and after getting out of it, and as I told y'all, that I was assaulted by someone else whom I don't really know. I didn't really know. Okay, I just knew vaguely that person had been with the former narcissist, the ex-narcissist, in some kind of very casual sense. So I guess that was all that I know. It was very vague, but then and I want to just talk a little bit more about this kind of situations where after 8 to 9 years of long silence, which kind of compounded my already existent PTSD or CPTSD, why I finally decided to you know report this to the police. Okay, so I'm gonna tell y'all a little bit more of the process. It's a very complicated and long day of a long process. Regardless of how many years ago it was, or how whether or even if it's recent, it's going to be very complicated because there are many loops we have to actually uh, jump past. And I mean, the legal system here in Singapore actually is it takes things like this very seriously, but sometimes, as we all know, it applies to any country, as long as there's this situation where like with the passage of time, the more you wait, the more you drag, uh, the more such things like evidence will either lapse or they will just simply fade away. That's just the way it is. And the police did tell me at the very beginning that, considering that it was so long ago and I don't really have any text or anything, um, all that they can probably do is to initiate an investigation and to find out their means, and of course to and we know that most of all these investigations, all these reports, regardless of the country where it was being reported, um, not all of them actually make it to the stage where the perpetrator of the crime will be legally charged. So it is just the nature of how our legal system has been, that is there's very little. And even a police officer that read, and he did tell me, say, oh, you know what, I just tell him, it's very different from the court of public opinion, because in the court of public opinion, everyone is, at least there's some kind of things which we call open secrets, and things that we know, and judgments are already made, okay, regardless of whether the facts point, or even the evidence or lack of evidence points in whichever direction. And And so, okay, the case with what happened with the assault, I'm not going to talk a little bit more about. I'm not going to talk about the situation because, to begin with, we all know that it is a lot of revisiting, a lot of reliving the PTSD, the trauma, and I think that during the process when I actually plucked the courage to tell the psychologist to go along with me to the police station to make the report. I think that she could actually recognize and detect the signs of my distress, and halfway through she just looked at me doing the statement taking and just told me to take a deep breath and to tell the police, you know what, you were not in a good state back then. That's why you do certain things, and we are not so rational when we get into this kind of situations. I mean, it's a very, to be honest, yeah, it's this is what one counselor told me himself. He would be have been the one to actually go with me to report the case, but he's no longer with the counseling center. And yeah, the main reason that I actually went to make the police report after so many years um, was simply, yeah, simply the very fact that the center was obliged, okay, on knowing what happened, to report it. So and even the psychologist herself said, you know what, we would have gone ahead to report it, even if we decide not to, which was like, oh, okay, so we one-sided on their end. Uh, According to her, it was done more to protect us and also to prevent any recurrences of this. So okay, to just go through what happened. The process is very complicated, as I said. I just want to go before I go onto the process. I want to talk a little bit more about what prompted me to actually finally make that decision, because I had a friend who was actually in that particular industry where the perpetrator of that crime has kind of insinuated himself into, and that friend just sent me a piece of, like, them just allowed me to know, and he said, you know what, whoever that you said has done all this, he thought that it was already reported quite a number of years ago and that I had made a report, but it wasn't. And when he knew that, he really realized, oh no, you should have reported earlier, because I think that it looks like the fact that you're thinking about it, the fact that people around you, including the counselors and psychotherapists, know about it, and they are telling you to do that. Okay, all this, and not just that, and also your friends, okay, the other friends, even a girl, okay, who's already a mother of kids. I don't know how many, one or two daughters, but and she herself said, go and do it as soon as you can, okay, regardless of whatever state it is. And there's a sense that obviously all of them all my friends are coming from this angle where, you know what, there's no point in keeping silent. You're not you're not protecting yourself, you're not protecting anyone, you're not helping anyone by keeping silent, because for years I know that one very screwed up reasoning that I had was, what if by reporting this I get people, the perpetrator, who's the one committing the criminal offense, into trouble? What if I ruin that person's life? Okay, but you know how ridiculous. They are the ones who ruin our lives. They, with every thing that we go through in the way of betrayals, assaults, abuse, we end up losing a part of our innocence, or even all of it. We keep on losing it. How do we lose it? We lose it because we stop believing in people's goodness within. We stop believing that people are inherently good, and we realize that there are people who are indeed evil. Okay, so that abuser or that assailant, the perpetrator who did that thing, okay, to me and other guys, other men, okay, years ago, okay, and probably is still doing it, some on the sly without all of it being detected, okay. The fact that he ruined our lives, okay, yet we have to actually think about him to feel that we are ruining his life by reporting and telling the truth. What mess up logic is that? Okay, and that kind of got me to decide no more. I and of course there's a the third thing was also the fear of retaliation. There was a fear that, what if the person will go after me with, slap me with lawsuits of defamation, lying, whatever. But this is the whole thing. We and even the psychologist has told me herself. She said, you have to remember, a lot of times we make the worst decisions in fear. We did so back then when we were subjected to that kind of situation of assault. And then we kept quiet, and we know one thing is for sure. The absence of a no and freezing doesn't mean that it's a yes. Okay? It doesn't mean consent. It never was that way. But and a lot of us, we know that there are four responses to trauma, crisis, and emergency: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. But who actually in the real decision will actually get into a situation where they fight back, or they take flight to run away? Actually, in actuality, not really, because you see in the movies or even in real life, when people see an oncoming car, how many people actually really just run? Some of them just freeze. We see that a lot in the drama series. We see that a lot in this. If it's so easy, then I don't think there'll be so many accidents, traffic accidents, and everything. So it's the same thing, like, when we say that. I remember talking to a psychologist once about this, concerning the refusal or willingness to report this. And she said, it's just like saying that, fear of retaliation, the whole thing, that I fear that my fearing that people will go after me or blame me or not believe me, saying that I brought it upon myself, that I deserve it. She said it's just like saying that a girl deserves to be raped or assaulted just because she wore a short skirt. This is a form of victim blaming and a form of scapegoating. And I have lived through it before with one particular friend who just ghosted on me and blocked me, and the irony is this: he said, as long as you go report it. It seems to be like a threat. And then he was like snooping on my social media for a few days before blocking me back in 2019. But now I mean, on the flip side, now after I've not actually reported the case, I know that whatever it is, this is for the best, because I don't want the perpetrator to go around doing any more of this. Okay, there has to be a kind of reckoning, even if it's not the law against the perpetrator. There has to be a higher agency. I'm sure that God is, in his own way, regardless of what we think. I know that some people will laugh at me and say, ha ha ha, there's no God. You would be surprised. Okay, the arm of justice is really, really long. Like, we have cases where, like the lawyers, the defense lawyers, who actually enable all these abusers and assailants, that they actually enable them by going around, threatening the victims and the witnesses, paying them off to settle. And I had one student of mine who knew about this, and he said, that's tampering with the cause of justice. Yes, I know it's tampering with the cause of justice, but what can we do? There are some people who are like that. Just because they're lawyers, they think they can use the law. They are above the law. And yet, the arm of justice is so long because that particular... I heard of cases where those lawyers were disbarred for other things, such as, assaulting people. So you know that in, maybe not sexually, but in a different context, maybe physically in the workplace, and the removing of the license where they can no longer enable all these perpetrators. So things are never that really simple, everything as we think it is. So ultimately, we all have to answer before God. You can claim to be a Catholic or Christian or whatever. If it's just a for show spirituality, God can see through it. Okay, he knows the heart. And it doesn't matter. You can act all you want, but God can see through it. And so all these factors realize, after I actually even remember praying about this. I asked God, what should I do after so many years, with the lapsing of time, the fact that evidence is almost scant or near to non-existent. What should I do? But I heard something inside my head saying, it could be God prompting this, or it could just be my own inner consciousness, higher self, saying, be the water that wears down the rock. Okay, you think about it this way: people who claim that and boast that they are always above the law, they can claim and claim and claim all the way, but ultimately, with the course of time, when more and more people come forth, and when the truth starts, hitting, they say the shit hits the fan. When all these things really starts surfacing, how possible is it for them to actually really silence the truth? Because truth is always ultimately like the sun that will pierce through all these different clouds and the dark clouds. Okay, so it should never be silent. So I kind of realized that, and during the whole situation, before I went to give the statement, I actually drafted what I was going to say, what I remembered of the assault incident. And also, so I actually went with just to talk about the process, I went with my psychologist. I met her outside. I was supposed to meet her outside, yeah, but the policeman saw me waiting outside, and one of them, and told me just to when he heard that I wanted to make a report, he just told me to go and wait for a while. And I waited while the psychologist came, and so everything started around 11:30. So from 11:30 onwards, there was statement taking. There's this process where the initial officer in the neighborhood police post, the one near my home, will be taking down my statement. But of course, in 1 hour, although in 1 hour everything was done, like in terms of taking that down the statement, I guess that in all cases, I thought that they wouldn't believe my story, but halfway through, there are some questions they will ask, which are very, they are very very invasive, in the sense that they are, I would call them blunt, but they are necessary to ascertain the degree of what actually happened. So they will ask you things like, did they do this? What did they do? What exactly did they? Was it like this? What was it? What do you do after and during a thing? How do you feel? Things like that. Because they want to ascertain that this was not, whether this was actually willing or not. Okay. So and at that point in time, he said, the perpetrator, at least who, you don't really know the perpetrator personally, but do you have a picture of the person? And I actually gave him the picture because there was Wi-Fi in the station. So I used the Wi-Fi, and I showed him the photo that I had, which was a recent one from a few days ago. And he took a shot of that from my phone, and he did some search as well. And he actually called his investigating officer from another branch nearby, who came over and again continued asking certain things about the statement and everything. So it was ultimately being escalated, in a sense, from just a mere report to investigations. But it wasn't the end. Okay, so from 11:30 to 2:30, it was like all these two police officers, one after the other. But I think that ultimately at the end of it, the investigations officer just asked me whether I could actually go make a trip to the main branch, the main headquarters of the police, over in my country, so that I can actually take the real statement itself. Because in this case, the offense is classifiable under what we call a serial sexual crime. Okay, he was telling me about the legal classification, what was perpetrated against me as the victim. Okay, so in that sense, they only take the report. So, but the ones doing the investigation is at the main headquarters. Okay, so again, that was the same thing. I went back home for a quick lunch for half an hour, took my trip, which was like 1 hour or so. So by the time I was there at the headquarters, it was 4, and ushered in after exchanging my identity card for the visitor's pass. And also, yeah, and so there was this whole thing about this, and then the whole thing about taking a statement again, just confirming once again, reconfirming what I said with extra details, and he did say ask certain other questions related to the statement that I had made at the neighborhood police post. And the final thing was actually probably the longest. It was from 5 something all the way to 7, almost around 7, almost 8, around 7:50. Okay, when it really ended. When he called in the police officer, the one doing the investigation, called in the one in charge of the investigations team, okay, to really clarify everything. So at the end of everything, questions were being uh, answered by me, obviously, because I was a victim. And also there was also a verification of the identity of the perpetrator, which ironically it was like he gave me a piece of paper, a piece of white paper, but on the piece of paper they were like, it was in boxed up in different boxes. Or I counted about at least, I would say, around 12 to 15 different faces, at least, probably around 15. I think at least 15 faces. Okay, I can't really remember exactly how many, but in terms of the exact number of the faces. But he asked me, who was the perpetrator? Can you identify that thing? I pointed back immediately when I saw that face to that one person who was responsible, the perpetrator. Okay, and I knew very well. I said, how many percent is that? Really close. I said, that's the same face. I can recognize that face, but this was a younger picture. Okay, from, I don't know, from maybe years ago compared to now, from the picture that I showed, which was via a friend who was in the organization that he had insinuated himself into. So from the looks of it, it looks like there were probably prior complaints or police reports made against the perpetrator. But I mean, I don't want to go too far ahead of myself. I did ask about retaliations, both at the possible kind of things like will they try to slap me with defamation suits or claim that I'm lying, because obviously there was this whole thing about them needing to actually get the other side of the story from the person. Okay, and they will obviously interview the person, ask for things and whatever. And we know that investigation sometimes can take really long time, can take months, and sometimes, according to one friend of mine, he told me that even years. So there's no guarantee that it might yield anything. And they did tell me, with the fact that it's years, it might not yield anything. And we know that no perpetrator of a crime will admit, yes, I did it. Okay, very, very rarely. So at the end of it all, I kind of realized, that it's not so much as even the final investigating officer himself. It's not always just to. It's part of a journey of kind of like a healing and recovery, because I think for us, he himself said, you're not an isolated incident. He was trying to assure me that. And he said that it might be a very long day. The fact that I spent almost about more than 7 hours. Okay, 3 4 yeah, almost 7 more than 7 hours, on just relate on reporting and taking and statement taking with regards to what I experienced in terms of sexual assault as a man. And it's not even just that. The fact that I had to deal with possible ostracism, judgment, and even disbelief from people who claim, you're a big guy, how can you even be assaulted sexually? But the thing is this: anyone who knows about the psychology underlying such things will know that sometimes it has nothing to do with size, height, your build. It has a lot to do with power and control dynamics. Okay, so the whole aspect or dynamics of grooming always involved in all these cases. And like, if we knew that there's a car coming on, obviously will we go across and do it? We won't. Okay, but a lot of times it's just, I mean, as I said, our coping mechanisms are very flawed. And even the psychologist said herself, she said, you don't sound like you obviously you were not in a good state of mind to make all these good decisions back then, and you should actually let them know. Okay, so yeah, so of course I'm still concerned. I worry about retaliations. What if they slap me with a undue lawsuit just simply because I told the truth, the fact that this was not consensual, this was assault. And yeah, a lot of this whole but scared, the whole fear of becoming victim shame or scapegoated, and 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 at that point I kind of realized, why am I thinking that way? And there are all these patterns that keep on cropping up in my head, and I was like, oh, okay, it's time for me to stop. um, and even I told my psychologist, she was only there with me during the morning session, not during the afternoon or evening time when I was taking a statement. So she had looked at me, and while looking at me, she said, take a deep breath, slow down, okay. There was one point when actually, I really couldn't answer because I kind of like almost, I was getting very flustered. Very thankfully, I had prepared a statement of what I had experienced. There was something in my head was just telling me, just tell the truth in terms of the facts. Write them down and show it to the police if you cannot speak. So that's what I did in the morning. And at one point I was even just showing him the entry. He had to look through it and ask me based on certain things like, so you mean that assailant touch your male member? What do you mean by the male member? Or things, I mean, without getting too explicit, we know what that means, okay? But I had to tell him, and how far he go. They do ask you these kind of questions. So there will, I really hope that regardless of what, there will be some form of justice, and that even the final police officer, the fourth one, they asked me, what do you hope to gain from this? I told him, I'm not doing this for revenge. There's no point right now to think about revenge, but I believe in justice. There should be justice for everyone, and I don't want this to happen to other people, okay? So yeah, so it takes a lot of courage to go through this. And one thing, I'm starting to really understand why people keep silent, but while keeping silent, that it's not doing us good when we keep silent as survivors. It doesn't matter whether it's assault, abuse, or or DV or whatever. Okay, even if it's not with people via people that all the more we should not keep quiet. Okay, but a lot of us deal with things like fear. Fear of retaliation is one very serious thing that cripples us, and then there's also shame. What would other people think of us? Okay, and guilt. Yeah, even guilt is so ridiculous. We are the victims of survivors, but we guilt ourselves. We guilt trip to say, did I do anything that caused it? Was I to blame, or is someone punishing me for that? We go through that kind of pattern. It's a very negative loop. It becomes very self-affirming and stops us from reporting the case. But anyway, now I think that, as a friend himself said after I told him that I reported, he said, it looks like there's certain people involved in all this that, including the former defense lawyer of that person, the perpetrator, in other prior cases. Okay, it looks like there's some nefarious people out there, and what he said was, but at least for yourself, you are probably able to find closure and a bit more peace to do this. So I think that is the beginning of a healing journey. So yeah, I think I'll have to actually see the psychologist next week about for therapy concerning this, because yeah, this is something that needs to be dealt with, and it will take a long time to recover. And we know that even the police officers, they admit, keeping on telling and reporting what you've gone through, the details, can be very re-traumatizing for the victims and survivors of assault and abuse. But sometimes, without the details, the police cannot actually reinitiate any investigations. They cannot do much actually in that sense. So, and I also know that, I mean, I'm not trying to keep my expectations too high, in the sense that I'm expecting the person to be jailed or so that I'll put away behind bars. Ultimately, it just depends on evidence. If there's no evidence, nothing can be done. But at least, as one police did say, your contact details will be redacted, so you don't have to worry about them harassing you in your place or your phone or your email. Okay, that's not going to happen. You can also block them, and they did give me their number to contact just in case I have any kind of harassment that I need to do. So at the point, if that ever happens, I will obviously have to file for a protection order. I might actually have to consider that if it ever happens. But he said himself, most of these so-called, this perpetrators always tend not to do anything because they don't want to worsen the situation than it really already is. Okay, so he did assure me that you'll be fine, and yeah, all I just know is that I want to really move on and live a life, heal and also recover from all this, so that I can really move from just surviving to thriving. Okay, so anyway, that's it for now, and I'm off to do something else. Okay, have a good one, everyone. Bye bye.